Harry, today we're going to discuss Mark in the Bible, and he's the one who wrote, obviously, the Gospel of Mark. So go ahead, Harry.
We do not know very much about Mark personally. Yes, his name sounds familiar to us, and it should. He was the author of the Gospel of Mark. So, did Mark know Jesus personally? I believe so. Could you read Mark 14:50 to 52?
Yeah, it says, Then everyone deserted him and fled. A young man wearing nothing but a linen garment was following Jesus. When they seized him, he fled naked, leaving his garment behind.
Yeah, that might have been Mark. Many believe so. This is when Jesus is arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane and his disciples fled, but they grabbed some young man who wasn't a disciple, and people believe it might have been Mark. So why does it matter? Several reasons if this is correct. Number one, Mark was a young man, by the sounds like likely a teenager when Jesus was arrested. Mark was adventurous and brave to be in the Garden of Gethsemane that night. Number three, Mark was somehow connected to one of the 12 to find out about this event. He wouldn't have known this on his own. The Gospels tell us that Jesus would go as usual to the garden to pray after the Passover. That's how Judas knew where he was. Number four, the main reason, Jesus would have wanted Mark to be there, witness firsthand the details of the horrors that followed that night. So, what other facts do we know about Mark, also called John Mark? Year 30, we just talked about that. Year 45, when Paul and Barnabas went on their first missionary journey out to the world at large, Mark went with them. In Colossians 4:10, Paul refers to Mark as a cousin to Barnabas, that's his companion. Mark had the courage to start, but left him after about 8 months. No real reason given. I presume he got discouraged. The year 49, Paul and Barnabas were going to head out on a second trip. Mark wanted to go again. Paul said no. So Barnabas and Mark headed out to Cyprus together on a missionary journey, and Paul chose Silas and headed out also. The year 66. Paul tells Timothy to bring Mark with him when he comes. This is the end of Paul's journey, and he's in a Mamertine dungeon and will soon die, as tradition tells us. In 1 Peter 5:13, Peter refers to Mark as his son. But Mark is much more than some Bible dates. His name keeps showing up in the New Testament, like Timothy and Apollos and others. I believe he remained single. He was married to Jesus. He kept showing up for work all the time, wherever it was available. So when did he write the story of Jesus, the gospel? Even though it is shorter, it was very well written. Mark was likely reasonably educated. In Acts 12, when Peter was led out of prison by the angel, it says in verse 12 that he went immediately to the home of Mary, the mother of Mark, obviously a lady of means because she had servants. We know Peter and Mark were close friends, spiritually related. I believe that in the early church, not long after Pentecost, Mark and Uncle Peter, to him, did a lot of visiting, and Mark did a lot of writing to give us this special book. Because it was so short and copying was done by hand, many copies were made and corrected as needed. When Saul, the enemy, became converted on the road to Damascus, he would have made his own personal copy that he carried and copied for the rest of his life. I love Mark, invaluable to the early church and invaluable to us today.
Amen. Thanks a lot for this, Harry.
Thank you.